When it comes to ranking the captains from weakest to strongest in Bleach, we had to start the list with Soifan, with her Shikai being Suzumebachi. After being hit by Suzumebachi, it leaves a crest on your body. This same crest just so happens to be very dangerous because if you are hit in the same spot wherever a crest may be on your body, it will kill you instantaneously. Essentially, if Soifan hits you in the same spot twice with her needle, she will kill you no matter what. 2 hits and you're dead. So of course this makes her very dangerous, and it only gets worse from here because Soifan can make it so that she doesn't have to hit a crest directly. She can aim for the organ inside of somebody and make it so that she doesn't have to hit someone on the same exact part of their body. Rather than attacking someone from the front twice, she can attack someone from the front and the back in one single attack. Soifan can hit someone twice with one attack, all in one motion, making it seem as if she's hitting them only once, making her ability a practic instant kill. To put it simply, rather than hitting your forehead twice, Soifan could hit your forehead, then the back of your head, and you would die. But she would do this all in one attack, and the crest Soifan puts on her opponents will never come off unless she wants it to. Next we have Soifan's bankai, Jakuho Raikobin, which is the complete opposite of what you would expect from her because she's an assassin who fights with stealth. But instead, her bankai allows her to shoot a missile from her arm, which completely obliterates opponents, with her missile exploding against anyone she fights on impact. However, it does have a setback. She can only use her bankai twice in one day. After using it for the second time, she would completely pass out, and even then, sometimes her missile doesn't always finish her opponents off. Next in the ranking, we have Kensei Muguruma, with his Shikai being a knife, which is pretty practical, outside of the fact that anything Kensei cuts with his knife explodes. What would really make this weapon stand out is its combat style and unique shape. As if Kensei didn't seem explosive enough already, with his bankai Tekken Tachikaze, whenever Kensei throws a punch, as soon as it makes contact with his opponent, as long as his fist is sitting against a surface, it will cause explosions to endlessly attack someone on the inside. Whenever Kensei punches someone, it causes explosions to endlessly travel throughout someone's body as long as his fist is hitting them. Right after, we have Kaname Tosen, with his Shikai being Suzumishi. With this Shikai, Tosen's able to make a sound vibrate from his sword, and upon hearing this, anyone will become unconscious only to fall to the ground. Tosen's Shikai has another ability known as Suzumushi Nishiki Benihiko, which allows him to shoot a bunch of needles from his blade. And while in the air, he can allow these same needles to rain down on his opponents. By simply taking off the ring that is attached to his sword, Tosen's bankai allows him to make a space that he can fight in, with it being called Suzumishi Suishiki and Makarogi. When being within this same space, Tosen's opponents begin to become blind and lose all sense of hearing. Whenever you are within the space of Tosen's bankai, you can no longer sense sound, smell, sight, or even spirit pressure. This makes you a sitting duck to any one of Tosen's attacks, allowing him to sit there and skewer you while you will never know the direction that he's attacking from. Oddly enough, anyone trapped in Tosen's bankai will still have their sense of touch, and so they can use this as a way to counter his fighting style. The weakness behind Tosen's bankai is to grab his sword, and this is possible by allowing yourself to get attacked, and then immediately after, you can grab Tosen's swords and the effect of his bankai will no longer work. Just make sure that once you grab his sword, you never let go. If you do, then the effects of the bankai will come back on. When it comes to fighting a durable opponent, Tosen's bankai is not the best. For the next captain, we have Sajin Kamamura. With his Shikai, he is able to use the limbs of a giant in order to attack his opponents. With the swing of his katana, the limb of a giant will be right behind it, only to cause enough destructive force to level buildings. With that being said, Kamamura's bankai would be quite similar. However, a big difference between Kamamura's Shikai and bankai is the very fact that the bankai is a lot more powerful and has a lot more strength behind each and every swing. Not only that, he he actually ends up summoning an entire giant to fight alongside him, which copies his movements to a T. Unfortunately, Kamamura's bankai does have a weakness, because if you end up injuring the same giant that he's attacking you with, he's going to end up having the same injuries. Kamamura's amazing source of power just so happens to be a giant weak spot, allowing the enemy to attack him with ease. If you end up cutting off the head of Kamamura's giant, you will also cut off Kamamura's head. When it comes to facing off against fast opponents, Kamamura will get utterly destroyed. Even so, Kokujo Tengen Myo has a special perk, because once it takes its armor off, it becomes immortal. And if you haven't put the pieces together yet, if you can no longer damage Kamamura's giant, then you can no longer damage Kamamura. However, this also comes at a price, with that price being Kamamura's life. And so if Kamamura's bankai uses its immortality, he could beat a pretty good amount of opponents in the Bleach world. However, he will end up dying after the fight. If not that, he will suffer a worse fate. Here you see one of the most cunning captains of the Gotei 13, with that being Gin Ichimaru. With his Shikai Shinso, he's able to launch his sword and make it stretch at a long distance, which is a very deceitful fighting style, because this allows Gin to hide the length of his sword, and his opponent would not be able to judge this length. Therefore, he could punish them for misjudging exactly what he's going to do with his sword. After attacking, he can retract his sword instantaneously and even allow it to bend. But the sword bending is the least of your problems, because the sword itself is 500 times faster than the speed of sound. Gin's weapon is even more disgusting than you could even imagine. When using his bankai, Kamishini no Yari, Gin can easily cut through Karakura Town like it's nothing, leaving every building in sight cut in half. And this is all with one single swipe of his sword. Gin could easily take out an army. Still, keep in mind that he can shoot his sword and then have it retract 500 times faster than the speed of sound. This gives him the perfect offense and the perfect defense. When using Kamishini no Yari Buto, the sword itself will shoot itself and retract before you could even notice. With his next technique, Kamishini no Yari Buto Renjin, he's able to make it shoot and retract at least 100 times, if not more. It's really hard to keep track, but every single shot of the sword will stack on top of each other and make a giant attack of blades that will skewer you like it's nothing. And this isn't even the most dangerous ability that Gin could use. What Gin can do is launch his sword inside of you, only to leave a shard of it inside of your body, which is filled with a deadly poison that will dissolve your cells, which will inevitably kill anyone and anything it gets inside of. He can kill you at a cellular level. No one is surviving. Whenever Shinji Hirako uses Sakanade, the Shikai of the weapon inverts everything, meaning that front turns to back, left turns to right, and up turns to down. You know when you're just playing Call of Duty, you look left and then your character just ends up looking right? You know those kinds of controls? That's basically what Shinji's ability is. If you play inverted, you're disgusting. Anyway, this ability controls a person's senses. If someone's above you, you're going to have to swing your sword at your feet. If someone's at your right, you're going to have to swing your sword to your left. Literally, your entire worldview becomes backwards. It gets even more insane from here, because the direction of your very sight and your wounds are also reversed. Even then, any words you hear from Shinji can also be reversed. Unfortunately, Sakanade Shikai does have a drawback. 2 to be exact. With the first one being, I don't know how, I don't know why anyone is able to do this, but if you're a freak of nature, you can just adapt to this ability and just still fight Shinji while all of your senses are reversed. Even Shinji himself states that it's impossible, but I guess anything can happen. So that's something to think about. And if someone attacks from every single direction, Shinji can still be hit and the Shikai will literally be meaningless. Man, Shinji has it rough. Here's hoping his bankai will be broken in the future. Send him a prayer. But if all else fails, he can use his hollow mask and shoot a Sero in order to damage his opponents, and while using a hollow mask, his speed and power will increase significantly. Now we are in the face of royalty. Byakuya Kuchiki Shikai Senbonzakura causes cherry blossoms to be used as a weapon. Or to be more precise, these would be sword shards that would resemble cherry blossoms. I mean, you could only imagine what would happen if you were to be hit by these swarms of cherry blossoms. Your body would literally be torn to shreds. And that's only the offensive use of Senbonzakura. If Byakuya uses this Shikai defensively, cherry blossoms will block any oncoming attacks against Byakuya. However, there is a weakness to this defensive shield that Senbonzakura gives Byakuya. By being 85 centimeters close to Byakuya, he cannot attack you with Senbonzakura, because Byakuya would risk damaging himself in the process. If you get close enough to Byakuya, you could beat him easily. That is, if he doesn't use his bankai. Byakuya's bankai, Senbonzakura Kageyoshi, allows him to not only double the speed of the cherry blossoms with his hands, but also it allows him to turn each and every shard that was a cherry blossom into a sword. When facing off against this bankai, you are going against 1,000 swords at once, with all of them striking and piercing your body. If that isn't enough, Byakuya can use Senbonzakura Gokei, which allows 100 million blades to trap an enemy in a ball and attack them from every single angle possible. And if a situation truly calls for it, Byakuya can use Shukei Hakuteiken, which concentrates all of Byakuya's spiritual energy into one sword slice. This captain happens to be a sociopath and a genius at the same time, with it being Mayuri Kurotsuchi. With the Shikai of Ashisogi Jizo, with a single stab or cut, anyone who gets touched by this sword ends up becoming immobilized, meaning they can't move whatsoever, but they can still feel pain. Another ability of this freakish weapon, and this allows Mayuri to use Ashisogi Jizo Kyudoyan. In doing so, the Ashisogi Jizo screams, and then, within 4 seconds, it will paralyze anyone that listens to it. His sword is even more broken than you could even imagine, because he installs sensors inside of his sword. He is able to program it to detect any blade that enters within 2 feet of his body, and it will block any attack within 2 feet. Meaning that any attack you do to Mayuri will be blocked automatically without him having to do anything at all, with 0 effort. With Mayuri's bankai, Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo, he is able to spray lethal poison within a 100-mile radius, and it won't hurt him whatsoever. But when Mayuri's opponents come into contact with this poison, their bodies will begin to break down from the inside. All the while, Mayuri's bankai will be trying to feast on you at the same time. So not only do you have to worry about being poisoned, but you have to worry about being eaten alive. How do you survive this? I really couldn't tell you. And if you just so happen to fight Mayuri on a bad day, he can always just use his modified bankai, Konjiki Ashisogi Jizo Matai Fukuin Shotai, which has a pretty intense power within its own right. With his modified bankai, Mayuri's Ashisogi will give birth to another Ashisogi Jizo, which will give birth to an Ashisogi that's a direct counter to his opponent. Which means Mayuri can exploit your weakness or create a weakness in order to defeat you by simply creating a new monster with his bankai. If you are a fire user, then the Ashisogi will nonetheless use water in order to kill you because you're a fire user. Mayuri will beat you because he will just create something in order to defeat you, which says a lot about his character. This captain is without a doubt a fan favorite, Yoruichi Shihoin. Yoruichi is a very special case because she does not use a Zanpakuto. She solely chooses to rely on her Hakuda as her main way of fighting. And her special perk from using Hakuda would be her immense speed. With this same speed, she would be able to take out an entire squadron with her bare hands alone in a matter of seconds. And while taking a strike at Aizen while using Hakuda, she would manage to crack his chrysalis stage and even level a few buildings in the process. And when combining this same Hakuda with Kido, she would then be able to use Shunko. This lets Yoruichi use lightning in a fight. When using Shunko Raijin Senkei, Yoruichi can summon a giant pillar of lightning, which will electrocute anything and everything in its path. This same attack would be able to level buildings casually. And with her strongest use of Shunko Raiju Senki, Shunryu Koku Byo Senki, she takes the likeness of a cat and completely overwhelms her opponents with electric claws and speed that's on an entirely different level. I think we can all agree that fighting Yoruichi at close quarters is a death wish. Someone who should be no stranger to their own captaincy would be Rukia Kuchiki. When Rukia uses her Shikai Sode no Shirayuki, by simply aiming her sword at whatever she wants, she will freeze it in no time at all, turning any unsuspecting thing or person into shards of ice. When Rukia uses Sugi no Mai Hakurin, with each stab of the sword into the ground, she can encase her enemies in a giant trail of ice. Even so, that does run the risk of an occasional enemy breaking out of this same ice. Even so, Rukia is able to use this technique while also in the air by allowing herself to levitate on ice itself. Another technique that Rukia uses is Tsukishiro, where Rukia draws a sword on the ground with the blade of her weapon, which only freezes anything and everything inside of this circle, which will encase you in a giant pillar of ice. You cannot escape even from the air. The only way of surviving is leaving the circle entirely, which is the exact opposite of a sea bear attack. While having a broken blade, if Rukia uses Shirafune, she can use ice as an extension of her blade and use it as a way to finish off her enemies. However, Rukia's bankai happens to be her most dangerous tool in her arsenal, which is to be expected, and it's pretty broken. With a pillar of ice coming from the sky, mist will envelop the entire area that Rukia occupies. Anything caught inside will literally freeze and crumble away, making this bankai an instant kill. Anything here gets frozen to absolute zero. And if you so much as even touch Rukia, you're going to freeze and die. Toshiro Hitsugaya has the strongest ice Zanpakuto throughout the entire series. With Toshiro's Shikai Hyorinmaru, he's able to create a dragon out of ice. When Toshiro sends this attack right at his opponent, they begin to freeze over, leaving you to be overwhelmed by water and Toshiro's manipulation of the weather. Toshiro's Bankai Daiguren Hyorinmaru allows him to use even more techniques unlike his Shikai, earning him the wings and tail of a dragon. When damaging Hyorinmaru, it will always regenerate itself because of the water around the atmosphere, leaving there to be no real way of destroying it. The same water in the atmosphere can also be used for attacks. With Sennen Hyoro, Toshiro can create multiple pillars of ice and collapse and crush them onto his enemies. With so much destructive force, Toshiro can even fight with deception by allowing his ice to create an after image of himself, which can be used to trick his opponents. Toshiro can even fight at a distance as well when using Guncho Surara, which launches ice shards at his enemies. Toshiro can get even more creative with his abilities. With each and every slice of his sword, he's able to drag ice and allow it to linger after his blade. Hyoryu Senbi allows him to keep a trail of ice, and after leaving this trail, Toshiro can then manipulate this same trail and follow his opponents with his attack. If he some way somehow gets his hands on you, or sword to be exact, he can use Ryu Senka and impale you with his weapon, freezing your entire body on contact. When using Hyorinmaru's most powerful attack, Toshiro can take full advantage of the weather. The attack Hyoten Hakaso drags ice out of the sky itself and completely overwhelms an opponent. the ice itself will rain, with a single piece of it landing on you being fatal. With each and every drop of the ice rain, it will instantly freeze and shape into the form of a flower, and encumber you until you are nothing but a display of flowers. And all of this isn't even the complete form of Toshiro's bankai. With the complete version of Daiguren Hyorimaru, Toshiro becomes older, and anything Toshiro makes contact with becomes flash frozen, meaning that it will freeze instantly, to a point where he even freezes all matter itself. All earth, wind, water, and fire within 10 feet will be frozen. Don't even bother trying to fight him, because the minute you touch him, you're going to be frozen. I know the last thing anyone was expecting was for a Vizard to be ranked so high. However, Rojiro Otoribashi can truly hold his own. With his Shikai, Kinshara, he's able to turn his sword into a whip and take down multiple enemies with one strike. With Kinshara Sonata number 11, Izayoi Bara, by tapping on his whip, Rojiro can cause anything close to the other end of his whip to explode. With Rojiro's bankai, his true power is put on display with Kinshara Butodon. His bankai showcases a live music performance, which in turn can lead to one's death. With Sea Drift, he can drown and encase you in water, and with his second dance, Prometheus, he can burn you alive. And finally, his third dance can cause you to die by stopping your breath, with it being Einheldenleben. When Rojiro does this, your death is practically guaranteed, because you cannot even cover your ears to stop listening to his song of death. The only way to stop this is to destroy your own eardrums, and most people wouldn't even go as far to do this. With that being said, by simply listening to a song, you will die. Now we have one of the most mysterious and most gruesome on the list, Retsu Unohana. Unohana's Shikai is a very interesting one, with it turning into an actual living creature that she can use for transportation. With her taking the role of the healer, this Shikai is very convenient, because even with people inside of its stomach, it is able to heal them. This happens to be one of the more deadly bankais as well, with it being Minazuki. Minazuki becomes coated in blood, with this same blood being acid. When Unohana swings her sword, everything is dead. The blood from her blade eats and melts away at opponents. No matter how durable they are, they will be torn apart from a single touch of her weapon. Kenpachi Zaraki is one of the most combat proficient Shinigami in the entire series. Kenpachi Shikai no Zarashi has the power and destructive force to cut through a meteor. No Zarashi even allows Kenpachi to cut through space. Yes, you heard me, he can cut through space. He can just about cut through anything he wants. And with this bankai, he takes the form of a demon and goes through a rage which allows him to bite the arm off of a giant like it's nothing, with little effort, and split this giant in half with ease. He doesn't even have to try at this point. His strength is in an entirely different league. So much so that his body can't even maintain all the power that he obtains through his own bankai. Shunsui Kyoraku is a very special case, with his Shikai Katen Kyokotsu, which can turn a child's game into reality. Anyone who steps inside of its realm of spiritual pressure has to obey its rules, even Shunsui, meaning that no matter how strong an opponent is, Shunsui can force them to fight on equal footing with his self. With Iroh Oni, Shunsui forces both fighters to pick out a certain color to attack. If someone is wearing white and you say white, then you are able to damage them. And if I'm wearing white and I say that I'm going to attack someone else wearing white, because I'm wearing the same color as that person and I run the risk of being hit myself, I do more damage to my opponent based on the color that I call out. While performing Kageoni, Shunsui creates a game where if anyone steps on a shadow, they will lose and can be punished with an attack. If Shunsui uses Taka Oni, whoever's on a higher elevation can end up killing their opponent with one hit. Anyone at a lower elevation loses. There are even more games where this came from, but I think you guys get the idea. Shunsui's Bankai Katen Kyokotsu Kuromatsu Shinju is an ability Shinsui only uses whenever he's certain that there are no allies around that can be caught in this attack. With Act 1 of Shunsui's Bankai Tamaraiki Zuno Waka Chiai, Shunsui and his opponent begin to share the same exact wounds. Act 2 Zanki no Shitone causes the opponent to be struck with an incurable disease. Act 3 Dangyo no Fuchi then causes both fighters to be trapped underwater. And the final act, Ito Kiri Basami Chizome no Nodobue, causes a thread of regret to wrap around Shunsui's opponent, which he then cuts with his fingers, only to finish his opponent off with one hit. Kisuke Urahara is a man who is smarter than even Aizen himself. With his Shikai, he uses Benihime, which really allows him to flex his resourcefulness. When ordering Benihime to scream, Urahara can then create a shield in front of himself so that he can prevent an attack from making him lose his arm in a fight, and with the same command, he can launch his own sword slices at an enemy, turning it into a projectile so that he can fight anyone at a distance. With the use of Shibari Benihime, Urahara can bind his opponents down to the ground, which disables his enemies and prevents them from moving, which can allow him to follow up with an even more powerful attack. With his follow-up Hiyasobi Benihime Juzu Tsunagi, he can create beads on the end of his binding, which will cause a giant explosion, which really goes to show how simple and effective a weapon combination from Urahara really can be. Urahara's Scream command can also leave a lingering trail behind his blade, which will damage his enemies with each and every one of his sword slices. The Supane command from Benihime allows Urahara to negate any attack from analyzing the reishi composition of a technique. This, alongside analyzing the muscle pattern of an opponent, allows Urahara to practically be untouchable. Urahara's Bankai Kanan Biraki Benihime Aratame gives Urahara the power to reconstruct anything that Benihime touches. If Urahara takes any damage while in his Bankai state, it will simply be undone because it will be reconstructed in an instant. By simply being in the range of Urahara's Bankai, your entire body will be reconstructed. By simply being near Urahara, you are at his mercy, and he can always also come closer to you if you're outside of his range. Even then, he can also manipulate the strings of Benihime to reach his opponents. The extent of his Bankai is practically endless because he can just reconstruct anything that he sees fit, even his opponents. And now we have Sosuke Aizen, who really needs no introduction in the slightest. With the Shikai of Kyoka Soigetsu, when using Kanzen Saimin, Aizen can manipulate all 5 of his opponent's senses, meaning that you will never actually fight him if you are able to even draw your blade against him. If you take a single glance at his sword, you're going to be swallowed by Aizen's hypnosis. So much so that his single sword could be a clone of Aizen himself, and a fly could appear to be a dragon. With only his Shikai, Aizen can take down all of the captains by himself. And this is all due to the fact that no one will ever have the chance to actually hit Aizen when they are under his hypnosis. Aizen could appear to be right in front of you and not actually be there at all, leaving you to just swing your sword into the wind. You could really only imagine what his Bankai would even be like. And now we have our honorable mentions, who one way or another could not find a place in this list due to not having enough information on their abilities, or another reason entirely. Isshin Kurosaki, Ginrei Kuchiki, Kenpachi Kiganjo, Jushiro Yukitake, Tetsuzaimon Iba, Isane Kotetsu, Lisa Yadomaru, and Love Aikawa. And finally, we have the strongest captain throughout the Soul Society, with it being, it should be no surprise at all, Genryusai Yamamoto, who is the strongest Soul Reaper within 1,000 years. With Ryujin Jaka, Genryusai will turn everything into ashes. The very flames from his sword will spread to the surroundings and cause everything to burn. By simply taking his sword out of its sheath, a pillar of flames will be summoned behind him, and he can manipulate them using Jogaku Enjo only to make the flames into a wall of fire, leaving no one to cross his path. Using Ryujin Jaka Nadagiri allows Genryusai to completely cut his enemies in half, only to engulf them in flames with a single swipe of his sword. Without having to make even direct contact with his weapon, he will cause his enemies to scorch to death. From simply standing there, Genryusai can summon a giant pillar of flames that can take out buildings without any single form of effort at all, causing the flames to eat away at the rubble as if it's not even there. Finally, with Entetsu Jigoku, he can summon a multiple amount of these flame pillars to destroy his enemies. And we're only getting started. With Genryusai's Bankai, Zanka no Tachi East, Kyoku Jitsujin, by only letting the tip of his blade touch the ground, it will split the entire surface in half. Zanka no Tachi West, Zanjitsu Gokui, encompasses Genryusai with flames. These flames making up Genryusai's presence alone is enough to destroy the entire Soul Society. You heard me right. Genryusai can destroy the Soul Society from simply standing there. Kakajuman Okushi Daisojin lets Genryusai summon an army of 1 trillion undead warriors who will stop at nothing until they grab their opponent, burning them until they turn them into a pile of dust. And with Genryusai's most powerful attack, Tenshi Kaijin, he will literally incinerate anything his sword touches, leaving not a single trace of it behind. How do you fight him and survive? I really couldn't tell you. But with that being said, Genryusai is the strongest captain throughout all of Bleach.